Welcome back to Module 2. My name is David Tan. In this module, we will discuss the principles of direct and indirect control. The objective of this module is to provide an objective approach to investigating unsafe practices by understanding what happened, why it happened, and whether the outcome resulted from system factors, human error, or a deliberate violation. This approach supports fair, consistent, and effective decision-making while promoting accountability and continuous improvement in workplace safety. 2.1 Investigating the unsafe practice. Investigations into unsafe practices are inherently sensitive, as individuals may be reluctant to disclose or acknowledge acts or omissions that could expose them to criticism or liability. Accordingly, the primary objective of an investigation is not to attribute blame, but to establish the relevant facts and identify the circumstances, conditions, and contributing factors that gave rise to the unsafe practice or incident. While the investigation process is not intended to apportion blame, it is essential to determine the individuals who bore the relevant responsibilities in relation to the incident. Such determination is undertaken not for the purpose of assigning fault, but to ascertain why the required duties, obligations, or prescribed procedures were not performed or complied with. A thorough, impartial, and evidence-based investigation enables the identification of both the immediate causes and the underlying systemic factors, thereby facilitating the implementation of effective measures to prevent recurrence. The ability to obtain reliable, accurate, and legally defensible factual information is a professional skill that cannot be acquired through a brief period of instruction alone. Rather, it is developed progressively through practical experience, critical judgment, and repeated application. Although many organizations have requested short-duration programs to develop lead investigators, a 1 or 2 day workshop cannot, by itself, equip participants with the level of competency necessary to conduct comprehensive investigations or effectively elicit and evaluate factual evidence. Accordingly, this guide is intended to provide the viewer with the theoretical principles and methodological framework for gathering factual information. The practical competencies associated with interviewing, evidence collection, and fact-finding must be cultivated through continued practice and field experience. These principles are examined in greater detail in Module 4, Philosophy of Fetching Concrete Evidence. Only after the relevant facts have been objectively established and the foregoing questions have been satisfactorily addressed should any determination be made regarding appropriate corrective measures, organizational accountability, or individual responsibility. 2.2 The human origin of unsafe conditions and unsafe acts. Unsafe conditions are hazardous situations, environments, or physical circumstances that have the potential to cause accidents, injuries, illness, property damage, or other harmful consequences. Although unsafe conditions may appear to be physical problems within a workplace, they generally do not arise by themselves. They are often created, introduced, permitted to remain, or left uncontrolled through human decisions, actions, or failures within a system. Examples of human-created unsafe conditions include poor equipment design, inadequate maintenance, insufficient training systems, ineffective safety procedures, poor workplace planning, and excessive workload demands. These conditions are the result of decisions made by individuals, organizations, or systems responsible for designing, managing, and controlling workplace hazards. Unsafe acts are actions or behaviors performed by individuals that violate, or unintentionally deviate from, established safety rules, procedures, or accepted practices. Unsafe acts may occur due to a lack of knowledge, inadequate training, poor communication, fatigue, distraction, misjudgment, or intentional disregard of safety requirements. Regardless of whether they are deliberate or unintentional, unsafe acts may contribute to accidents, injuries, illness, property damage, or other adverse consequences. It is important to distinguish between the cause of an unsafe condition, the cause of an incident, and accountability for preventing harm. The existence of an unsafe condition does not automatically identify who is responsible for an incident. Responsibility depends on factors such as who had control over the hazard, whether a legal or safety duty was breached, whether the risk was known or reasonably foreseeable, and whether appropriate corrective actions were taken. For example, a vehicle brake defect may result from human factors such as design decisions, manufacturing processes, quality control, testing, maintenance practices, or oversight failures. The unsafe condition, the defective brake system, was created through human activities or system failures. However, determining accountability requires an investigation into the specific causes, decisions, and responsibilities involved. Therefore, unsafe conditions and unsafe acts should not be viewed as isolated events. They are often connected through a chain of human decisions and system weaknesses. Unsafe conditions may influence human behavior, and unsafe acts may allow hazards to result in incidents. Effective safety management requires identifying the underlying human and system factors that create, allow, or fail to control these risks. In summary, unsafe conditions do not appear by themselves. They are usually created, allowed, or left uncontrolled by human systems. 2.3 Fundamental concepts behind unsafe behaviors. Human error is a major contributing factor to workplace incidents and accidents. Understanding why people make mistakes is essential for improving safety performance and preventing future occurrences. Human actions that lead to unsafe outcomes can generally be classified into two categories: errors and violations. Errors are unintentional actions that occur because an individual is unable to make an accurate judgment, remember information correctly, perceive the situation accurately, or reason effectively. The individual has no intention of causing harm or deviating from the correct procedure, but the outcome is nevertheless undesirable. Violations, in contrast, are intentional deviations from established procedures, codes of practice, rules, or regulations. Although the individual knowingly chooses not to comply with the required procedure, the intention is usually to save time, increase convenience, or overcome operational constraints rather than to cause harm. The human behavior classification model for unsafe acts may be categorized into two primary classifications: unintentional errors and intentional violations. The distinction between these categories is essential in determining the appropriate response, accountability, and corrective measures. Unintentional errors refer to unsafe actions or decisions that occur without the individual's intention to disregard safety requirements. These events typically arise from limitations in human performance, judgment, perception, or situational awareness. Such errors may include skill-based execution errors, incorrect judgment or decision-making, perceptual misinterpretation, mode errors, activation loss errors, attention lapses. Intentional violations occur when an individual knowingly departs from an established procedure, safety requirement, or accepted standard of practice. These violations may be classified as follows: accepted deviations, pressure-driven deviations, and misplaced confidence. 2.3.1 Errors, unintentional. Skill execution errors occur when an individual intends to perform a task correctly, but the physical execution of the action does not achieve the intended outcome. These errors are related to task performance, coordination, timing, control, or estimation of physical conditions, rather than a lack of knowledge or understanding of the task. Examples: a forklift operator attempts to lift and balance a long pipe, but incorrectly estimates the pipe's center of gravity. When the mast is raised, the load becomes unstable and shifts unexpectedly. A truck driver attempts to reverse into a loading bay, but misjudges the vehicle's position and steering movement, causing the rear of the truck to strike the loading structure. A machine operator adjusts a control spindle, but applies too much movement, causing the spindle to break. Incorrect judgment occurs when an individual makes an inappropriate decision or chooses an incorrect course of action based on their understanding of the situation at that time. Examples: an operator chooses to continue operating equipment despite abnormal sounds because he judges the issue to be minor and not requiring immediate action. A worker believes he can use his leg to press a machine stop button instead of using his hand. However, his judgment is incorrect because the machine does not stop immediately, resulting in a delayed response and potential injury. Perceptual misperception occur when an individual's understanding of the surrounding environment, system condition, or available information differs from reality. The person receives information through their senses or available indicators but interprets it incorrectly. Examples: a worker believes a machine has stopped because the noise has ceased, but the rotating parts are still moving. A driver misjudges the distance of an approaching vehicle. Mode errors occur when there is a mismatch between an individual's intended action and the action actually performed. The person has the correct intention or objective, but unintentionally operates in the wrong response mode, resulting in an incorrect output or action. Examples: an administrative staff member intends to type the word bad in a report, but accidentally enters sad due to selecting the wrong letters. The individual understands the task and the intended information but produces an incorrect output. A data entry operator intends to enter information into one field, but accidentally inputs the data into another field because the cursor remains in the wrong location. Activation loss errors occur when an individual fails to initiate a required action, fails to activate a necessary control, or unintentionally omits a critical step before or during a task. The individual knows the correct procedure but fails to execute the required action at the appropriate time. Examples: a worker is transferring material from an ISO tank to a storage tank using a pump. Before starting the transfer, the worker forgets to open the tank vent valve. As the pump creates negative pressure inside the ISO tank, the tank structure collapses due to vacuum conditions. The incident occurs because the worker failed to activate a required step in the transfer process, despite knowing that venting was necessary. A technician forgets to complete a required inspection step before handing over equipment. Attention lapses occur when an individual fails to notice, respond to, or complete a required action because their attention is diverted, interrupted, or reduced. The individual may know the correct procedure and understand the hazard, but their focus is temporarily directed away from the task, causing an important action or signal to be missed. Examples: a worker fails to give a hand signal to stop crane movement because their attention is distracted by a project manager scolding another worker nearby. A spotter fails to notice that a vehicle is moving into a restricted area because his mind is occupied with personal concerns, such as financial stress from losing money on a football bet. A machine operator misses a warning alarm because they are distracted by a conversation while monitoring the equipment. A forklift operator fails to see a pedestrian entering the operating area because their attention is focused on positioning the load. Attention lapses are not caused by a lack of knowledge or an intentional disregard for safety. They occur when human attention is limited and competing demands, interruptions, distractions, or environmental factors reduce the individual's ability to focus on the critical task. 2.4 Direct control and indirect control in workplace safety. Creating and maintaining safe workplace conditions is a fundamental requirement in occupational health and safety management. However, workplaces become complex when human behavior is introduced into the system. People make decisions, adapt to changing conditions, and sometimes deviate from established practices. Therefore, effective risk management requires organizations to identify and control hazards to a level that is as low as reasonably practicable, ALARP. The term, control, can be divided into two categories: direct control and indirect control. 2.4.1 Direct control refers to the actions and decisions made by individuals who are directly involved in performing a task or operating equipment. These individuals have immediate interaction with the workplace environment, tools, machinery, materials, and processes. They have direct influence over how work is carried out at the operational level and are commonly referred to as workers, operators, or shop floor personnel. Examples of direct control include following or deviating from safe work procedures, operating machinery correctly, using personal protective equipment, PPE, identifying and reporting hazards, making decisions during task execution. Example: A worker is required to wear safety goggles while drilling a metal plate because the drilling process can generate sharp metal chips that may be projected towards the eyes. The worker has direct control over whether the required personal protective equipment is worn before starting the task. If the worker chooses not to wear safety goggles and suffers an eye injury from flying metal chips, the unsafe condition resulted from a failure at the direct control level. Indirect control refers to decisions, systems, and conditions established by individuals who may not directly perform the task but have authority, responsibility, or influence over how work is planned, designed, managed, and supervised. Individuals with indirect control shape the workplace through policies and procedures, work instructions, equipment design, resource allocation, training requirements, supervision and monitoring. Those exercising indirect control are typically part of management, engineering, or organizational leadership. This may include senior managers, department managers, plant managers, line managers, supervisors. Example: a company requires workers to transfer chemicals from ISO tanks, but does not provide a clear operating procedure, does not include venting requirements in the work instruction, and does not provide adequate training. Although the worker directly performed the unsafe act, management and engineering decisions contributed indirectly to creating the conditions in which the error occurred. Building upon the concepts introduced above, this section presents the complete framework of the human behavioral classification model for unsafe acts, integrating the relationships between human behavior, unsafe acts, and workplace controls. Human behavior classification model for unsafe practices. This model categorizes unsafe acts by examining whether they result from unintentional errors or intentional violations, while considering the influence of indirect controls, systems, procedures, training, design, resources, and supervision, and direct controls, worker actions and decisions. It supports fair investigation by identifying the underlying causes of unsafe behavior. This concludes Module 2, Principles of Direct and Indirect Control. Thank you for your participation and engagement throughout this module. Please proceed to the next session, Module 3, Psychological Analysis of Unsafe Practices, where we will further examine the human factors and behavioral considerations that contribute to unsafe acts.